These children are to the Child Guidance Clinic. Diagnostically, most of them fall into the clinical categories which include the garden variety of behavior disorders of childhood. A small percentage, however, are suffering from more severe conditions. The group with more serious pathology are children who are mentally defective, those with organic deficits, the severe character disorders of the psychotype, and full-blown neuroses. Some, a very few, are psychotic. What characterizes these children? How do the psychoticness? What are they used to establish the diagnosis of childhood schizophrenia? The diagnosis must penetrate the symptom facade. The diagnosis must not only sharply define a disease entity, but also differentiate it from conditions which resemble it and with which it might be confused. External manifestations may be the same, and yet the underlying disease may be different. On the other hand, outward appearances may differ, and yet the disease process may be the same. Diagnosis depends on teamwork. The basic clinical team in the Child Guidance Clinic includes one or more psychiatrists, social workers, and psychologists. Let us observe the diagnostic process. We shall have an opportunity in this conference to review the diagnostic data that we've gathered on several children who we suspect are suffering from childhood psychosis. I say childhood psychosis because, as you know, recently many clinicians have been reluctant to use the term childhood schizophrenia.
I think background in adult psychiatry makes it easy to understand why there's been a reluctance to make a diagnosis of schizophrenia in children. In the first place, the condition doesn't seem to resemble the pictures of schizophrenia presented by adults. The classical syndromes of catatonia, hebephrenia, and paranoia are not observed in children.
This is certainly true.
Child may be locked in fantasy, may show poor rapport, and may be fairly egocentric, and yet these are characteristics of childhood which are still within the wide ranges of normality of childhood.
But there is also the question of the differences of the disease manifestations at different age levels. We know from examples in medicine that cretinism in childhood and myxedema or hypothyroidism in adults are the same disease, even though they appear different. And the same holds true for gigantism and acromegaly, the pituitary diseases, which have different forms in childhood and adulthood. In schizophrenia, the disability, the core of the problem, in young as well as in old, is an ego disability, an ego fragmentation, of which there may be evidences very early in life. How is it uncovered? The clinical team discusses each case with respect to its history, including the presenting symptoms, the past history and developmental data, and the family history, the physical, neurological, and other medical laboratory data, the psychological test findings, and finally, the clinical observations. This diagnostic process may be likened to the passage of clinical data through a series of sieves which screen out the diseases other than childhood schizophrenia. The sieves are the history, the medical, neurological, and other medical laboratory data, the psychological findings, and the clinical observations. It might be said, parenthetically, that the histories we get are sometimes blurred, or significant details are withheld, as in the following case where a traumatic event occurred when the child's father became depressed, and this event was not reported until 1 year after the child was in treatment.
He would take her by the hand and bring her to the little wet spot and point to it and tell her that it didn't belong there, and that she mustn't let on the floor, and he would drag over to the potty and tell her, this is where you must urinate, this is where you must urinate. Then he would take her and sit her down on it and just tell her to sit there, and all the while she was sitting there, he would tell her, now next time sit on the potty.
And what happened with
just
that potty?
over and over. And the potty, well, once he just pushed her down so hard, the potty cracked. The seat of the potty cracked.
How did she react?
Sharon, she just started crying. She just cried.
Following this incident, when the child was 18 months old, her speech, which had developed normally up to this point, regressed, and she became autistic, mute. Although the incident and the regression are related, we cannot conclude that this is a causal relationship. Without going into the question of etiology, mention should be made of hereditary and constitutional considerations as well as traumatic life experiences. But to return to the question of getting historical data, sometimes we are inclined to feel that getting a history is simply a matter of sitting down a parent and hoping that then the material will come forth. What is the experience of the social worker in getting the history from the parents of these children?
Well, the material can never come forth that way. Usually, these parents come to us in a state of panic. They invariably seem to be more disturbed than the average parent that comes into the center. They are very secretive about important data. They're very slow in giving it to you. And they are in such a fearful state of anxiety that you will sometimes have to see them a number of times before you can get any kind of a coherent picture of the behavior or the early developmental history.
Well, don't you think that a characteristic and distinguishing feature of the childhood schizophrenic is the disturbance which you see at every level of growth and development in the child?
Perhaps we should mention first the area of the intellect, of the unusual development or unevenness in development. So often the parents are impressed with the precocity of the child. Then we get histories of children who appear to be musical geniuses, unusual precocious development in the area of mathematics or in the area of art. And this preoccupation with music as well, you said?
Music, classical music.
Classical
Scarlatti sonatas, yes. He used to sit and literally, for hours, he'd sit and shake and cry when we stopped playing. Liked to be read to a lot, and had a phenomenal memory.
Aside from the intellectual development, the feeding history of the child sometimes is very striking. Feeding difficulties range from selective to complete refusal of food. The development of bizarre or rigid food fads is quite common. For example, I remember one case where the child had lamb chops and green peas and would eat nothing else for a year and a half. Toilet training may be exceedingly difficult. These children resist strongly and at an advanced stage frequently enjoy smearing. Motility disturbances are also common. Some of these children walk on and show unusual awkwardness. Also, they have a tendency to whirl.
I think in these children we often see withdrawal from group situations. They don't adjust too well with children of their own age. They tend to play by themselves or with younger children. And then in the school situation, we see that they withdraw from competitive situations. That is, they either act up or stay by themselves, and that this is part of the withdrawal situation which we observe in the history.
Did he have an appreciation for people?
No, nothing at all. No concern. And of course, wherever there were children, he would run the other way. In fact, at that time that was about the time when he started having a very definitely negative attitude. If the other children came near him, he would cry and tell them to go away. we don't want them. Go out. He didn't want to play with other children. And I noticed that the other children his age were all playing together. And he did not want to play with any of the children.
Was he afraid of them?
Yes, he was really afraid of them. And he would sometimes even say, I'm afraid of them, I don't want them. And he would scream and tell them to go out and go away.
Hastening the withdrawal are phobic and obsessional tendencies, also commonly obtained in the histories.
For example, you take the barbershop, the whole barbershop experience. He was afraid to take haircuts. Well, you figure that's normal in a child. There's nothing amazing about that a child should be afraid of taking a haircut. But this was more so than in a normal case. It persisted over a long period of time, and it was accompanied by an ambivalent reaction on his part. He was not only afraid, but he was so attracted by it that he couldn't resist going to barbershops, staring outside. He would literally want to stand for hours and watch the barbers through the barbershop. You see, it was an ambivalent reaction of attraction and fear.
Fear.
That's right. Well, I assume it was fear because in his first experiences of taking a haircut, he cried bitterly, resisted. It was always a major traumatic experience to take him for a haircut. And the truth was that after a while, it didn't take long before he decided, well, to devil with it. Taking haircuts is not so important. We'll just let him not take haircuts. But that didn't solve the problem, because he would draw us, make us take him to the barbershop. Exactly. See.
So there was a speech and then the preoccupation with certain things like
ties, pipes. You see. Now you buy a child a tie, you can see why he wants to wear a tie, or his daddy wears a tie, let's say. So you buy him a tie, or you put on a tie around him. He'd want to be draped in dozens of ties and go outside. You see in his car.
A dozen ties?
Dozens, literally. I mean, there'd be no end. Atomizers, stethoscopes, you see. No end of these things. Pipes.
And many, many of them.
Many, many, and as a matter of fact, very hard to distinguish a pattern.
In the history, we have heard of these significant developmental deviations. Deviations in feeding, the precocious, peculiar reaction on the part of the child in eating, in toilet training, in locomotion, in speech development. As in the adult form of schizophrenia, the medical, neurological, and laboratory data, such as the air encephalogram, electroencephalogram, serology, blood chemistry, and so forth, do not provide positive diagnostic aid in childhood schizophrenia. The psychological data, in contrast, are quite significant and often pathognomonic. The Rorschach protocol includes bizarre content, autistic and deviant productions, poor contact with perceptual reality, a low F+%, massing of pure color responses.
Now you take this in your own hands, okay, and now tell me, what does this look like? What is it? See, I'm writing down what you say. Now you tell me, what does this look like? You take it in your own hand. You take it. That's a good boy. Take it in your own hand, see? Now tell me, what does it look like?
A fire.
A fire. And tell me, where's the fire? Show me where the fire
Over
is.
here.
Where? Where is it? I
Over
didn't see.
here.
Oh, I see. And what else does it look like? What else do you see there? What else do you see on this picture? Joe, what else do you see on this one? Joe, what else do you see on this one? What else do you see? What else is it?
Leaves.
Leaves, the word leaves. Show me the leaves now.
Here.
Oh, yes. Where? I didn't quite get it.
there.
Oh, look. You know, you got to look and show me.
The drawings of the schizophrenic child are grotesque productions in which there are distortions, fragmentation, movement, loss of bodily boundaries, sexual preoccupation, violent aggression, concretization, and perseveration. Clinically, we are impressed by speech disturbances. In autistic children, there may be speechlessness. That's good. That's good. Now she's doing it. That's fine. Are you singing? You remember that song? Good morning to you. Do you remember that song? Good morning to you. Do you remember that? We're all in our places. Remember that, Sharon? With the sun shining faces. Remember that? Sharon? And this is the way to start a new day. Do you remember that? That's a sweet girl. She's a sweet girl. She can say things. How are you, Sharon?
When the child does speak, I think, too, that very often one will notice an eerie quality about the speech, a high-pitched kind of sound.
No, I'm doing things.
These, would you like to play with these?
No, the other 20 things.
Or the other 20?
I want to watch.
Well, there are 20?
Yeah. Watch again. I want Fabian to go and look.
You want to look? Well, we'll find them. We'll find them.
Now.
In addition, parents may complain that their children parrot speech, echolalia, and that they condense or invent words.
I do like you. What does
I like you.
still mean?
I like you, too. Buy stew, puppy stew.
All right. Well, they spell buy stew, puppy stew.
Spell buy stew, puppy stew.
Spell it.
It's pretty hard. I don't know. What does it mean?
I'll cut it out. You cut out those rabbits. Will you cut it out?
Will you make some here, and then I can cut them out?
No, you cut it out.
Here with this.
There's no, if there was room.
Yes, fella. Where'd you get that buy stew, puppy stew?
I don't know where I got it. Cut out. Yeah.
Yes, I will.
Cut these big ones out. Say buy stew, puppy stew.
Buy stew, puppy stew.
Bye, the puppy stew.
Now, what does that mean?
You know what that means.
I don't know. Where did you pick it up?
Buy stew, puppy stew.
Where did you pick it up?
Buy stew, puppy stew.
The neologism, buy stew, puppy stew, we learned later, was a condensation of words referring to biting and stool, or feces. This brings us really to the question of the use of language, not for the purpose of communication, but to play with, and as part of the withdrawal of these children. The clinician is also impressed with the way in which the schizophrenic child relates to him. Here, too, there are extremes. The autistic child who is oblivious of him, and at the opposite pole, the child who clings excessively.
We have noticed here that these children tend to form a rather intense, clinging, possessive kind of relationship with one person. And it's noticeable that in situations where this one person is the parent, these children have terrific problems of sibling rivalry.
I've been struck by how openly they use others erotically. They'll either stroke their skin or use some part of their clothes to arouse themselves, or much more openly masturbate in public than any other children would.
One knows that the frustration tolerance is very short, and these children are known to have violent temper outbursts in which they cannot be comforted. Their relationships are so ambivalent.
This incontinence, this weakness of the ego, which permits the breakthrough of the instincts, associated with the tremendous anxiety which characterizes these children.
This tremendous anxiety is shown sometimes where the whole world is regarded as destructive and menacing, and where the child isn't able to find anything fixed to hold on to or to find reassurance in.
How comparable this is to the world destruction fantasies that one sees in adult schizophrenics. But again, this is really the hallmark of the psychosis.
The child withdraws and creates a world of his own.
Yes, this in a way defines the condition that we are dealing with. that this child has made a world of his own, where he lives within his fantasies, his own delusions.
That's another one.
What is that?
Another one.
Another what?
Cat.
That's another cat. I see. Yes, that's another cat. Oh, that's pretty. That's pretty. How many cats do we have there now?
3.
3 cats. Show me.
Here they are. Here's one, here's one, and here's one.
Good, good.
This is a cat.
What did you say that one was?
Paintbrush.
That's a paintbrush. And we have 1, 2, 3 cats and 1 paintbrush. Would you like to draw another cat?
Yes.
Would you like to draw another cat? What do you draw?
Cat. Oh.
That's a 4th cat.
How many? 4 cats.
That's 4 cats.
Now I've
Let's
got...
see if we can get Joel here. Let's see, right here on this side. Let's see. Now let's get Joel here.
Here's Joel.
Joel, go ahead. Good.
Here's
Good.
2 legs.
Good.
2 eyes.
2 legs, 2 eyes. Go ahead.
A mouth.
That's the mouth.
A chin.
And what's that?
A finger.
That's the finger.
And here's the back. Here's the body. Right.
And there's the body. That's very good. That's Joel. And now let's see if we can get Joel's mother right here. Let's see. We'll leave this one over here. And let's see if we can get Joel's mother. This was Joel over here. Here we have Joel. And now we're going to get Joel's mother right here. You want to draw that on that one? There's an empty page there. Let's see if we can use this one. Fine. Now let's get the mother. Here's a...
What color is that this?
Purple, yes. And what is that you're making now?
Face.
That's the face, yeah. And then?
Here's the eyes.
That's the eyes.
Here's the nose, and here is the face. And here's the body, and here are the shoes.
And here's the shoe.
Yes.
And that's
Yes, the end.
Now show me the face again, Joel. Joel, show me the face.
Here it is.
Is that the face?
Yes.
Now where's the body?
Right there, and here are the 2 legs.
And those are the 2 what?
Legs.
I see. All right, fine. That's very good, Joel. That's very good. Our evidences of the existence of this private world are to be seen not only in the emotional responses, which may be inappropriate in the behavior of these children, but as Mr. Tolchin has spoken to us many times, how often these evidences come through in the psychological test material.
The stickiness of the thought process, I think, is extremely important, and the generally poor awareness of reality.
The child really is locked in these fantasies and often lives in a world of delusions, sometimes again comparable to what we see in adults. The paranoid trends, the ideas of being poisoned, the preoccupations with the body, the somatic delusions, the hypochondriasis, the ideas of internalized objects, which Melanie Klein has reported. All of these things we see in these children. A difference from the adults is that hallucinations, which are common in adult psychotics, are not as frequently observed or obtained in the children. It brings us really to the other important issue, that of the efforts on the part of the child to control all these disturbances by the restitutive function, an attempt to restore a real world, to alleviate the anxiety that he experiences in living with these delusionary ideas, with these horrifying fantasies. And in these restitutive efforts, one sees all of the massive phobic and obsessional trends which are so common in these children. Our tendency at times is perhaps to overlook the fact that these obsessional and phobic responses may appear to be neurotic. They are actually pseudo-neurotic. These children attempt to deal with this frightening world by setting up changes. Oftentimes, for example, they remove themselves from the world and would prefer to live in a prehistoric existence. I remember a child whom you all recall who was preoccupied mainly with dinosaurs.
Yes, they show a peculiar relationship to animals, too, in some cases where we see children who, in compensation for the lack of relationship with other children, will fall in love with a horse or will talk to animals.
We shouldn't, of course, lose sight of the fact that the existence of any one symptom, even of a set of symptoms, doesn't make the diagnosis of childhood schizophrenia. We need the totality of the picture. Also, these are not mild deviations. This is a severe condition. This is not an evanescent condition, one which is seen today and perhaps changes tomorrow. This is a chronic condition. But the clinical assessment is not complete unless the differential diagnosis is made as well. Psychoneurosis and psychopathy must be ruled out. Also, not infrequently, childhood schizophrenia is confused with organic reactions or with mental deficiency. And in the past, many schizophrenic children were mistakenly diagnosed and included in these last two clinical categories. Actually, making the differential is not a separate step in the diagnostic process. Diagnosis and differential diagnosis evolve simultaneously while passing the clinical data through the diagnostic sieves. In the case of organic reactions, diagnostic clues that bear the stamp of organicity include the following. There may be a history of germ measles in the mother in the first trimester of the pregnancy. In the child, a history of birth trauma, meningitis, or encephalitis at an early age, or of epileptic seizures. Neurological signs may be observed. Or the serology may tell the story. There may be positive findings in the electroencephalogram. Compare a normal with an epileptic record. Or the air encephalogram may be positive. The psychologist reports poor visual motor performance, as for example in the drawing of a diamond in a child over the age of 7, or in the Gestalt tests. And the following typical Rorschach findings: perplexity in handling the cards, paucity of responses, W- or poor whole responses, shading responses, and perseveration. Impulsivity and hyperactivity are characteristic clinical findings. The differentiating diagnostic aids in mental deficiency include a history of retarded development in all areas, for example in speech, walking, toilet training, and so forth. All these may be obtained. There may be a history of retardation in other family members. In the physical examinations, microcephaly, hydrocephaly, and Mongolism are easily recognized. In mental deficiency, the drawings are primitive. For example, a Kopfmensch. Compare this drawing of a 10-year-old defective child with one made by a child of average intelligence of the same age. Clinically, the fatuousness and emptiness of the child are striking. Having made a differential diagnosis, we must keep in mind that the diagnosis still remains tentative, in spite of all the material that we have gathered, in spite of all the other data that we have from point of view of laboratory, of psychological and our clinical observations and the like. It should remain tentative in most cases because further history that we may obtain may elaborate the problem further. In addition, further clinical observations may change our point of view. Finally, we need follow-up studies in order to ascertain whether there is a definite relationship between this clinical condition and the adult form of schizophrenia. We, of course, are aware of the fact that schizophrenia in the past was the end point, a pessimistic barrier to further work in this condition. It shouldn't remain as such.
That means shut up.
Shut up, it means.
What?
Who says shut up?
My father.
He says shut up. And why does he say shut up?
If I wake him up at night, I say,
Ah.
good night, Daddy, and I say, shut up. And sometimes he says good night, and he doesn't.
Sometimes he says good night, and sometimes he says shut up. Mm-hmm. Well, how many times do you say good night to him, Freddie? How many times do you say?
I don't know.
Huh?
Shut up, I said, shut up. What does Vice Good mean? Vice,
There, now, let's go.
Good riding, you know, as the enema bag blows you into geritol.
The enema bag blows you into geritol?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
You know what I mean.
What is that? What do you mean?
Tell me about Vice the puppy stew.
Well, who has the enema bag?
Nobody except that Vice to puppy stew.
Vice to puppy stew has the enema, and what does the enema bag do?
Blows me into geritol.
It blows you into geritol, and then what happens to you?
I come out of the bottle.
Then you come out of the bottle. What bottle?
Geritol.
You're in a bottle of geritol? And how do you get out of the bottle of geritol?
Fly out.
How's that?
And when a mouse went into the enema bag, and the enema bag...
A mouse went into the enema bag, and then where'd the mouse go?
And down to open the enema bag, and then he came out of the enema bag.
And where does the mouse go?
Outside in the enema bag, spills, and it goes away, and he sweats the mouse.
I should think that the mouse goes into the enema bag, and then through the tube, and where does it go?
From the bone, couldn't come out.
Into what?
I don't know.
Well, where does the stuff go from the enema bag?
The water.
And where does the water go?
That's in the tushy, the mice.
Into the tushy. And why does the water go into the tushy? What for?
I'm frightened of that.
What are you frightened about?
I want the door open.
Yeah. Well, we were going to talk about those frights.
What does bicycle puppy stew mean?
We were going to talk about all those frights.
What does I'll take my strap and beat you so hard? We'll have to even it out anyway.
Mm-hmm. I'll take my strap and I'll beat you so hard.
Daddy says that.
Mm-hmm. Why does he say that?
So I wake him up at night.
You wake him up at night.
I did. I mean, say shut up. I call, good night, Daddy, and you say shut up.
Shut up.
All right, after I'll take my strap and beat you
I'll
up.
take my strap and beat you up.
I'll beat you so hard. Say
I'll
that.
beat you so hard.
Good night, Daddy.
Shut up.
I sing Bye to Puppy Stew.
Bye stew, puppy stew.
My daddy really doesn't say that.
He doesn't really say that. As a matter of fact, I really think he doesn't know why you wake him up.
If I got those frights about the enema bag.
That's the thing. He doesn't know about frights in the enema bag, so he doesn't even know why you wake him up. He thinks, what does he think when you wake him up?
I'd be bad.
He says, that boy is just bad. And meanwhile, what's happening to Freddie?
Nothing.
Why? What is he feeling?
I'm frightened about
Oh, frightened! What is he frightened about?
the enema bag.
The enema bag! And whom does he want to help him?
Mommy.
And? His daddy, so he calls Daddy!
What does he say?
Good night. Shut up!
I shouldn't.
He shouldn't say it. Why not?
Because I want him to help me.
I want him to help me. And what do you want him to help you with?
The enema bag.
The enema bag. Well, we got to get to that enema bag, Freddie. After all, we got to help out with that.
How?
What's going to happen when we help out with that?
It'll go away.
Yes, how will it go away?
How will it go away? It'll just go away.
What'll happen to that fear?
It'll go away.
Mm-hmm.
We'll talk to the enema bag and say, don't you frighten me.
Don't you frighten me, we'll say that enema bag.
And if I fill you up with water, you'll stop.
I fill you with water, you'll stop.
It's all filled up.
And then when I don't have that fear of you, then in the middle of the night you won't bother me, and I won't have to call my father, and he won't have to say, shut up, because I won't be frightened of that.
And if I wasn't, my daddy say, I'll come to you.
Mm-hmm. Because if you weren't afraid, he'll say, I'd come to you. Sure he would. You know.
If I was afraid, he'd say, I'll come to you still further.
Mm-hmm. And if you were afraid, he would come to you. That's right. You know who loves you.
My Pop.
That's right. He loves this boy. The diagnosis of schizophrenia should open the door to the treatment of this dreadful condition in childhood. This severe disturbance in childhood which blights the growth and development of so many children that we see in our clinics today.